Chapter 9, Demand Forecasting. In this video, we'll go over the demand forecasting process, qualitative and quantitative methods, the product lifecycle view of forecasting, and forecasting in the supply chain. Every business, whether it's a large multinational corporation or a local small business, engages in an activity called demand forecasting. So we're going to talk about some of the key concepts as these are interconnected, and understanding them will help enhance a company's ability to meet its goals, which we learned about in Chapter 2 under Supply Chain Strategy. So let's start with the most basic concept, demand. In its simplest form, demand is the need or desire for a particular product or service. This need can come from individual consumers, other businesses, or even government agencies. So for example, when you, the consumer, want to buy a smartphone, there's a demand for those devices. This need then drives the production and supply of smartphones around the world. Next, businesses need to anticipate how much of a product or service will be required over a certain period. This is where demand forecasting comes into play, and that's the process of predicting future demand for a particular good, component, or service. It involves analyzing historical data, market trends, and other factors to estimate how much product will be needed. It's important to have good forecasting because this helps to inform decisions regarding production, inventory, staffing, and more. Then there's demand planning. So this takes demand forecasting one step further. Demand planning involves combining statistical forecasting techniques with expert judgment to construct demand estimates across the entire supply chain, from the raw materials you get from vendors all the way to the finished products that go to the consumers. It's a holistic approach that ensures a business can meet demand efficiently without making too much or too little. Finally, there's demand management. This function is about recognizing and managing all demands for goods and services to ensure the marketplace is supported effectively. This is especially crucial when there's a limited supply of goods. So it involves prioritizing different demands and ensuring that resources are allocated optimally. Effective demand management not only meets demand, but also helps in planning and using resources in a way that drives profitable business results. So again, if we take the example of cell phones, let's say there's an unexpected surge in demand due to some cool viral marketing campaign, then your company might want to prioritize certain markets or customers. They might even adjust pricing or market strategies to help manage this demand so that we have enough available without annoying or alienating customers who can't get it right away. Forecasting is more than just crunching numbers. It's about guiding the future of a business. When you have a systematic process for forecasting, you're not just guessing, you're building a roadmap. And this roadmap is going to help you anticipate challenges, grab opportunities, and make strategic decisions with confidence. A structured forecasting process also allows for continuous improvement. By regularly reviewing and refining your forecasts, you can adapt to changes in the market, learn from past mistakes, and fine-tune your strategies to stay ahead of the competition. So let's take a look at the steps in our forecasting process. So step 1 is to decide what you need to forecast. And this can depend based on your goals. For long-term forecasts, these are used for strategic moves like entering new markets. So maybe a tech company might predict the adoption rate of a new technology over the next 10 years. Then you've got medium forecasts. This supports budgeting and expansion plans. So an airline might use these forecasts to decide on new routes. And then you also have short-term forecasts. These are more for daily operations like inventory management of a retailer during the holiday season. Then there's step 2, which is data collection, and accurate forecasting hinges on good data. So some types of data could be historical, like your past sales and factors like promotions or price changes. It could be economic indicators like trends in GDP or gross domestic product growth and inflation. Demographic trends like how the population has changed and societal trends, as well as expert knowledge. So you've got insights from industry veterans or experts or market analysts. Then there's step 3, and that's picking which forecasting approach to use. You can do qualitative forecasting. This is useful when you don't have a lot of historical data, and it's often applied to long-term forecasts, and quantitative forecasting. So this is based on the idea that past trends will continue, and so you can use past historical data, and it's useful for short or medium-term forecasts. Step 4 is method selection. So if you're going to choose a particular method, if you're doing qualitative, your choice depends on the nature and availability of the expertise. With quantitative forecasting, you'll choose a method that best fits the historical data and can accurately predict past demand patterns. Then there's step 5, which is forecast execution. So once you've figured out your method, go ahead and execute the forecast. But remember, it's not a one-time task. You have to continuously measure accuracy by comparing what you forecasted with what actually happened, and then adjust as you go. And then step 6 is monitoring. So you'll continuously monitor your forecasting model. Market conditions can change, so what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. And then tools like tracking signals can help you see when something has changed so that you can tweak your model or update it to maintain accuracy. So let's dive into the qualitative forecasting methods. And these methods are helpful when historical data is unavailable or irrelevant. So imagine you're a startup with a groundbreaking product. You don't have past sales data available. Or you might be a company entering a new market. And so previous patterns in other markets may not apply. A couple of qualitative methods include expert judgment. So this is where you are asking for forecasts from people who have deep knowledge in the field. They could be company executives, they could be industry analysts, or research scientists. These insights can help provide a forecast when we don't have data. Next is the Delphi method. This is more structured, but it still uses expert opinion. And this involves having a series of surveys conducted among a panel of experts. So after each round, the responses are shared anonymously, allowing the experts to refine or fix their forecasts based on each other's feedback. So the goal with this is to eventually get to a consensus. So this is really helpful in situations where diverse opinions might initially exist. The next one is market research. You may have experience with this one. So this is where we try to understand customer needs, preferences, and behaviors. So we'll collect and analyze data about existing customers as well as potential customers. And businesses can forecast demand for new offerings or anticipate shifts in demand for their products or services. This is a great approach when you're introducing new products or services into the market. Then there's consumer surveys, which is a subset of market research. And these surveys go directly to consumers. They will ask about their spending habits, their product preferences, and their future intentions. You might have filled one of these out before. These are tailored to forecast demand for specific items or even to identify broader market trends. This will help us better understand the customer base. Next is sales force polling. So instead of asking the consumers, we're asking the salespeople. So we're going to ask them about their insights from being in sales. They interact with customers all the time, and so they have a unique perspective. By polling or asking them about their expectations for sales in their territories or regions or on the different products that they sell, organizations can access real-time market intelligence that might be more attuned to current conditions than historical data. Last but not least is brainstorming. So this is where you're gathering a diverse group of individuals to generate a wide range of ideas and predictions about future demand. This collective intelligence and varied perspectives in brainstorming can lead to innovative forecasting insights, especially in areas or industries that are rapidly changing. Now, although qualitative methods offer invaluable insights, they do have some limitations or downsides. So it is subjective because human judgment can be influenced by your emotions, your perceptions, and your biases. It can be hard to replicate, right? So different experts might come to different forecasts with using the same information. So consistency can be hard. There's groupthink. So when we are doing brainstorming or the Delphi methods, there's a risk that everyone might just conform to a dominant or loud view and suppress or ignore different dissenting opinions. And then last but not least is overconfidence. Sometimes experts just overestimate how good they are, how good are their forecasts, and so they might miss something important. So knowing that there are limitations, you don't want to over-rely on intuition. You want to continuously assess how accurate your forecasts are so that you can update when you get new information. Then there's quantitative forecasting. So think quantity or numbers. So the assumption behind quantitative forecasting is that patterns observed in historical data will to some extent repeat in the future. So think about selling winter coats, right? So the exact number of coats sold every year varies, but the general pattern of increased sales when it's colder and decreased sales when it's warmer likely is consistent year over year. So let's take a look at 3 key methods within quantitative forecasting. The first is time series analysis. So this focuses on dissecting historical data to identify patterns and trends. For instance, a retailer might analyze monthly sales data over several years to identify peaks and troughs. When recognizing these reoccurring patterns, the retailer can then better anticipate sales for the upcoming months. While this method is foundational, it's important to note that time series analysis is a vast and continually evolving field. In the chapter, it dives a little bit deeper into some examples of time series analysis. For instance, it looks at the different levels or the average value in the series. It'll look at trends. Is it moving upward or downward? Is it season or seasonal in that there is certain patterns based on certain parts of the year? Think like winter and summer. And then there's also could be cycles, right? So these are long-term patterns that are driven by economic or other broad factors. So think like a recession when things go down or during a period of growth in the economy. The next key method in quantitative forecasting is causal modeling. So instead of just looking at the past data of the variable we're trying to forecast, it will instead look at the relationship between that variable and other influencing factors. So for example, a car manufacturer might develop a model that considers GDP growth, fuel prices, and interest rates to forecast car sales. The manufacturer thinks that these factors may be influencing sales. So by understanding how it can impact, the manufacturer can then make informed decisions about production and marketing. And lastly, our third method is machine learning. So this is an emerging technique that originates from computer science. It focuses on creating algorithms that learn from and make predictions based on data. Once trained on historical data, these algorithms can forecast a wide range of variables. So for instance, a tech company might use machine learning to predict user engagement based on past user behavior, platform changes, and external events. So think TikTok, right? There's an algorithm on that's trying to predict what you will like to watch or not watch. And so these forecasts can guide decisions on feature development, marketing strategies, and user support. In this visual, we see the product lifecycle view of forecasting. So if you've ever taken a marketing class, you may be familiar with these stages of product design, introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. And you can see here how profits and sales ebb and flow over these stages. And so with each of these stages, there are appropriate demand forecasting methods, as you can see down below here. So when you're in product design, you may use Delphi method, historical analogy, or executive judgment. And then when you're launching that new product or introducing it, you'll do surveys of your customers, of your sales force, and conduct market research. This also continues during the growth phase of the life cycle. And then as your product or service matures and eventually declines, that's where you'll apply time series analysis and regression models because you've collected a lot of data over the different stages of the product. So even if your company does a good job at forecasting using whatever methods it chooses, and it monitors and assesses and makes changes or updates to the forecast as it moves forward, we'll need to look at the broader supply chain because there's an interesting paradox or phenomenon that emerges. And so when there's a disruption, because life happens, somewhere along the supply chain, it can affect the entire supply chain and all of the different entities across it. This is known as the bullwhip effect. And so the bullwhip effect is a phenomenon in supply chain management where order variances amplify as it moves upstream in the supply chain. So if you can see here in the picture, my little stick figure is using that bullwhip, and you can see that the shape of the whip gets bigger and bigger the further away it is from my stick figure. And so we saw this during the pandemic when suddenly everybody wanted to buy toilet paper. The customers had this sudden change in demand, and that impacted the retailers because they ran out. And so they're like, oh, we got to buy more toilet paper because our customers want it. And so that information got passed to manufacturers who then also got passed on to their suppliers. And so everybody just kept ordering more and more, but the customers had stopped buying toilet paper by that time. And now we just had a whole lot of toilet paper on the shelves. So there are several factors that contribute to the bullwhip effect happening. Demand forecasting updates. So each entity or organization makes forecasts based on the demand from its immediate downstream partner. So whoever's downstream from them, whoever they're getting orders from, that's where they're going to base their forecasts on. Then there's order batching. So some companies order in batches, and that can introduce variations in order sizes and frequencies. It can distort the perceived demand. Then there's price fluctuations. So think about the promotional discounts and other pricing strategies that you've experienced when you shop. These can lead to a surge in demand during the sale period and then a subsequent drop afterward. So think about like grocery stores. They sometimes have sales on cereal. And when you see that, you're like, oh, let me buy all the cereal. But think about it. You're like, once you've bought the cereal, you don't need to buy it for a while, especially if you bought a lot during the sale. So then once the sale ends, the demand for it goes away. But perhaps that information about the purchasing by consumers flows back up to the supply chain. And so cereal makers start to produce more, like thinking like, oh, everybody's buying cereal when they're not really. And then there's shortage gaming. So a retailer might anticipate a shortage. So they'll order more than they need from the manufacturer, even though they know they're only going to sell some of that. And so they're kind of like ordering extra for safety. So there's two more concepts I want to cover because these can help possibly mitigate some of the issues that we see in the bullwhip effect. The first is CPFR, or Collaborative Planning, Forecasting, and Replenishment. So this is a collaboration process where supply chain trading partners jointly plan key supply chain activities from production and delivery of raw materials to production and delivery of final products to our customers. So some of the shared tasks and responsibilities between like a manufacturer and its retailer or manufacturer and its suppliers are joint business planning. So this is where both parties discuss and share and set mutual business goals and strategies so that they are aiming for the same thing together. There's sales forecasting, where you're sharing data and creating a joint sales forecast. There's order forecasting. So this is where you could do predictions about upcoming orders based on your sales forecast. And then inventory replenishment. So these are inventory levels that are adjusted based on the order forecast. You can see how each piece builds on the other. And so, for instance, when I was in procurement at a variety of companies, I often would have meetings with my suppliers and I would engage in these different activities. So like as a manufacturer, when I'm working with my suppliers, I'm setting goals with them. I'm sharing our sales forecasting. I'm trying to collect order forecasting information internally to figure out how much we're going to buy and then share that with our suppliers. And then also just talking about like how much inventory are we carrying and how it should align with our order information or our order forecast. So by doing these activities, CPFR can help minimize the bullwhip effect. And it just improves communication overall between the different entities. Now, the next concept or approach is called Sales and Operations Planning, or S&OP. And so this is a coordinated approach to business planning that integrates sales, marketing, and supply chain functions. So think this is more internal. So the other example, CPFR, is external across the supply chain, whereas S&OP is internal within the company. So remember in chapter 1, we talked about the silo effect when a lot of times departments don't talk to each other. So this is an approach that helps break down that silo effect where departments are communicating with each other for these different planning activities. So the processes involved in S&OP include demand planning, supply planning, pre-S&OP, and S&OP meeting. So I would engage with this when I was in procurement, right? So for demand planning, the sales and marketing teams would forecast demand based on historical data, market trends, and promotional activities, and they would share that with me in procurement. And procurement's part of the supply chain team, so we're looking at our resources like materials and production capacity to make sure that I'm ordering enough stuff to meet the forecast demands that the sales and marketing team did, as well as the manufacturing folks. They want to make sure they've got enough people, they've got enough production capacity to make all the products that sales is hoping to sell. And then with the pre-S&OP, this is the cross-functional teams review. So we're looking at everything and adjusting the demand and supply plans to make sure they're all in alignment across the groups. And then last but not least is the S&OP meeting. So this is where senior management reviews the plan, makes final decisions on production, inventory, and procurement. So by fostering collaboration between departments, S&OP ensures that the entire organization is involved and aligned in its objectives. So we'll end up with better forecasts, better resource allocation, and ultimately better customer service. So if you have any questions, just let me know.